All right, welcome back. This is an original story from Hidden Revenge Family, and it took a turn truly you didn't see coming. Let's get into it.
3 weeks before my sister's wedding, I learned something about my role in the family. I wasn't a daughter, I was a payment method. My parents liked to call it helping out. My sister Chloe called it supporting the family. But the reality was simple. If money needed to appear, my phone rang. Chloe's wedding budget was already somewhere around $150,000. I know the number because my father liked to repeat it proudly, like he was announcing the cost of a luxury yacht. Except he wasn't the one paying for most of it. That job quietly landed on me. I was sitting at the dining table in my parents' house when my mother Brenda slid a folder across to me like she was presenting a restaurant menu. "Just take a look," she said. Inside the folder was an invoice. $15,000 for flowers, not normal flowers apparently. These were custom imported arrangements. Chloe wanted white orchids flown in from Thailand and roses that apparently had their own zip code. I closed the folder and looked at my parents. "You want me to pay for this?" It wasn't a question. My father Arthur leaned back in his chair like a judge about to deliver a ruling. "Well, Evelyn," he said calmly, "you're single. You don't have a husband or kids. You don't really have responsibilities." Chloe, sitting across from me, smiled into her iced tea like she had just heard a great joke. "You make good money," she added. "And it's my wedding." That was always the trump card. My mother folded her arms. "It's just flowers. Don't make it a big deal. Just flowers. $15,000 worth of just flowers." I looked around the table. Nobody was embarrassed. Nobody looked uncomfortable. They were waiting for me to say yes. And the annoying part was that I usually did. Not because I was generous. Because arguing with them was like trying to explain gravity to a goldfish. I closed the folder and pushed it back toward my mother. "I'll handle it." Chloe clapped her hands once like a kid who just got a pony. "I knew you would. You're the best." No one said thank you. They never did. A week later, I made the mistake of bringing someone to Sunday dinner. His name was Vance. Now I should explain something. I didn't bring Vance to impress my family. In fact, if anything, I expected the opposite. Vance drove up in an old Ford truck that looked like it had seen every road in America at least twice. The paint was faded, the bed had a few scratches, and the engine sounded like it had opinions. He stepped out wearing worn boots and a faded red flannel shirt. If my parents believed in social rankings the way medieval kings believed in bloodlines, Vance had just shown up dressed like a stable boy. Chloe noticed immediately. Her eyes traveled from his boots to the truck and back again. "Oh," she said slowly, "you drove that." Vance smiled politely. "It still runs." Derek arrived about 10 minutes later. Derek was Chloe's fiancé and the human embodiment of a LinkedIn profile. He was an army captain in logistics and mentioned it every 7 minutes whether anyone asked or not. He walked into the house wearing a fitted polo shirt that probably cost more than my car payment. When Chloe introduced him to Vance, Derek looked him up and down the way people inspect furniture at a yard sale. "So what do you do, Vance?" Derek asked. Vance shrugged slightly. "A little bit of everything." Derek smirked. "That sounds flexible." We sat down to dinner a few minutes later. My mother had made steak, which was rare because she normally treated cooking like a minor inconvenience. Derek spent most of the meal talking. Actually, talking isn't the right word. Performing might be better. He talked about his rank, his responsibilities, his high-level clearance. At one point, he leaned back and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "You wouldn't believe the kind of classified logistics data I deal with." Vance cut a piece of steak and chewed calmly. "That must keep you busy," he said. Derek nodded proudly. "It does. A lot of pressure. Not everyone can handle it." Then he glanced at Vance again. "So what kind of work do you do exactly?" Vance wiped his mouth with a napkin. "I work with people who move things around the world." Derek laughed. "Oh, like trucking." "Something like that," Vance said. Chloe giggled. My parents smiled politely. Derek leaned forward. "You know, he said if you ever want real job stability, the military is always hiring, even for maintenance and support roles." He said it like he was offering charity. Then he added, "Guys who are good with tools can usually find something." Vance nodded thoughtfully. "That's good to know." The conversation moved on, but something interesting happened. While Derek kept talking about himself, Vance started asking small questions, polite questions, about Derek's unit, where he was stationed, what kind of supply chains he managed. Nothing aggressive, just curious. Derek answered every question eagerly like a student who thought he was impressing the teacher. Dinner ended about 40 minutes later. Derek and Chloe went to the living room with my father to look at wedding seating charts. My mother went into the kitchen. I followed a minute later to help clean up, but I stopped when I heard voices. Chloe was already in the kitchen with my mother. They didn't know I was standing in the hallway. Chloe snorted with laughter. "Oh my God, Mom, did you see that guy Evelyn brought?" My mother laughed. "The flannel one? Yes, he looks like he fixes lawnmowers for a living." My mother chuckled. "Well, it fits her level." Chloe lowered her voice slightly. "Seriously though, a truck like that? He has to be broke." "Probably," my mother said. "Evelyn has terrible taste." Chloe giggled. "Imagine bringing that guy to the wedding." My mother snorted. "Relax, by then we'll have everything handled." Chloe paused. "What about the venue balance?" And then my mother said something that made the hallway feel 10 degrees colder. "I already took care of it." "How?" "I used Evelyn's social security number and took out a loan." Chloe gasped. "How much?" "50,000. They both started laughing. Chloe said, "She's going to freak out." My mother waved it off. "She won't even notice. And if she does, we'll say it was a misunderstanding." I stood there for a moment, not angry, not yelling, just very still. Then I quietly walked out the front door. Vance was leaning against his truck in the driveway. He looked up when he saw me. My hands were shaking. I walked over and told him everything. The loan, the fraud, the laughing. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he stood up straight. Something in his expression changed. The friendly, easygoing guy in the flannel shirt was suddenly gone. In his place was someone much colder, much sharper. He looked at the house for a moment, then back at me. "Give me 24 hours, he said calmly. His voice had completely changed. "I'll find out exactly what the captain is hiding." He didn't wait for me to answer, he just opened the passenger door of his truck and nodded like we had somewhere to be. I followed him without thinking because standing in my parents' driveway felt like standing on a trapdoor. We drove a few blocks and parked under a streetlight near a quiet diner that was still open. Vance didn't suggest going inside. He just killed the engine and looked at me. "Do you have a laptop?" he asked. "Always," I said. That made him smile in a way that told me he wasn't surprised. I pulled my bag onto my lap and opened my laptop. I wasn't doing anything illegal. I wasn't hacking into anyone's private accounts. I was doing what I'd done for years professionally, following paper trails. The difference was, this time the trail was made out of my own life. First stop was the loan. I pulled my credit report. My stomach didn't drop. It didn't need to. I'd already heard the confession. The numbers were just the confirmation. There it was, a fresh personal loan for $50,000. My name, my social security number, my signature. Except it wasn't my signature. It looked like someone had tried to copy my handwriting from a Christmas card. Vance leaned closer, calm as ever. "Who co-signed?" he asked. "No one, which means they used my information clean enough to pass the first filter." "That's not clean," he said. "That's practiced." My fingers moved faster, pulling the lender details. The loan was tied to a bank branch only 15 minutes from my parents' house. Not my bank, not my neighborhood. The kind of bank you go to when you don't want to run into anyone you know. I exhaled slowly. She did this like she was picking up groceries. Vance nodded once. "Keep going." I dug into the paperwork the lender uploaded. Not everything was visible, but enough. The phone number listed was my mother's. The email was a variation of mine, like someone thought swapping one letter would make it invisible. I glanced at Vance. She didn't even try to be subtle. Vance's expression didn't change, but his voice sharpened a degree. She didn't need to. She assumed you'd keep paying and keep quiet. That was the part that hit hardest, not the fraud itself. The confidence behind it. I opened my banking app next. I didn't just look at my accounts. I looked at outgoing transactions, payments I'd made for family stuff over the past year, little things, a deposit here, a vendor fee there, a rush order for invitations, a last-minute alterations bill, always phrased like something urgent, always attached to Chloe's wedding. It added up fast. Vance watched the numbers climb. "They've been bleeding you," he said. I forced a small laugh. "That's a nice way to say milking me like a confused cow." He gave a quick, amused breath through his nose, then tapped the screen. "Who's Derek's bank?" I shrugged. "No idea. Let's change that." That was when he took out his phone. And I realized something I hadn't fully processed at dinner. Vance hadn't asked Derek questions because he was curious. He'd asked them because he was collecting details. Vance made 2 calls, both short. He didn't ask for favors, he didn't plead, he didn't explain much. He gave names, units, dates, and people on the other end moved. When he hung up, he looked at me. You have clearance. You work with records and traces. I have contacts who can confirm what's already on paper. He didn't say what kind of contacts. He didn't need to. I focused on what I could pull legally: public records, financial filings, court databases, and the digital crumbs people leave when they think nobody's watching. I searched Derek's name. Nothing jumped out at first. No arrests, no public lawsuits. Then I searched variations. Middle initial, previous addresses. A different result popped up: a civil judgment from a few years back. Not huge but telling. Unpaid debt that had been settled quietly. Then I found something uglier. A court-ordered wage garnishment that had been withdrawn. Withdrawn doesn't mean resolved. Withdrawn means someone negotiated, or someone paid, or someone made it disappear. My skin felt tight around my jaw. Vance pointed at the screen. That's not a guy with a clean life. That's a guy with a tidy cover. I kept digging. A small sports betting form popped up in the search results. Not exactly a resume highlight. Derek's username wasn't Captain Derek or anything stupid like that. It was something bland like D32, but the email linked to it matched the pattern of the fake email my mother used for the loan. That's when my sarcasm died. Because patterns don't lie. People do. I pulled data from archived pages and cross-referenced dates. Derek wasn't just betting, he was losing. A lot. Enough to leave angry comments about one more big win and just need to cover the spread. I started building a timeline. Payment dates, posting dates, the quiet legal settlement. By the time I was done, I had a number that made my throat go dry. $200,000. That's what he owed, give or take, across multiple illegal gambling circles. I stared at the total like it might change if I blinked. Vance didn't blink. Now we know why your family's acting like the wedding is a national emergency, he said. I shook my head slowly. Chloe doesn't even know, does she? Oh, she knows enough, Vance said. But your parents know everything. That made me laugh again, short and humorless. My parents always wanted Chloe to marry someone in uniform. Guess they forgot uniforms don't come with warranties. Vance's phone buzzed. He checked a message and angled the screen toward me. It was a name and a link to a file repository. What's that? I asked. A packet someone just pulled for me, he said. Public but buried. Open it. I clicked. Real estate documents, draft legal paperwork, a set of forms with my name on them. I leaned closer, my eyes scanning faster than I could breathe. A petition to declare me financially incompetent. The wording was polite, almost caring. It blamed stress, emotional instability, and poor decision-making under pressure. It claimed my parents were deeply concerned. And the proposed solution: appoint my parents as conservators. Over my finances, over my property, over my house. I sat back hard in the seat. They wrote this already. Vance nodded. That's not a plan you make in a weekend. My voice came out flat. They're going to steal my house. They're going to save you from yourself, he corrected like he was quoting someone. I stared at the paperwork, the signatures at the bottom. Arthur, Brenda, not filed yet, prepared, waiting. My mind didn't spiral, it sharpened. The way it does when a job gets serious. I clicked into the property section. There was an estimate of my home's equity, a projected cash-out amount, a timeline. And right there, tucked into the notes, was a phrase that made the whole picture snap into place. Post-wedding liquidity. They weren't just trying to control me. They were trying to use me like an ATM with walls and a roof. Vance looked at me. Now ask yourself why Derek needs that much cash that fast. I already knew the answer. I just didn't want it to be true. I opened a different database. The kind I use for professional work, auditing trails, verifying vendors, tracing funds through legitimate systems. Not hacking, not breaking in, following the math. Derek worked in Army logistics. That meant contract supplies, shipments, inventory. That also meant opportunity. I pulled what I could from publicly accessible procurement logs and matched them with shipment schedules I could legally reference. Then I looked for inconsistencies, things ordered, but not delivered, delivered, but not accounted for. The pattern showed up like a bruise under bright light. Missing inventory, repeated over time, big-ticket items disguised under boring labels. I zoomed in on one entry, and my stomach went still. It wasn't a small scam. It was a federal crime wearing a clean haircut. Vance leaned over my shoulder, reading without touching the laptop. "Say it," he said quietly. I swallowed. "He's been siphoning from the logistics fund." "Embezzlement," Vance said, like he'd already filed it in a mental folder. I clicked into the calendar notes attached to one of the procurement records. A routine audit schedule was listed. And there it was, the audit date. It was planned for the week after the wedding. I stared at it, and suddenly the whole wedding budget made sense. Not romance, not family pride, a cover story, a deadline. Derek needed to replace what he stole before someone walked into his office with questions and a clipboard. And my parents were getting ready to hand him my house equity like it was a wedding gift. I didn't feel like crying. I felt like someone had finally turned on the lights in a messy room. Vance took out his phone again, already moving. "Who are you calling?" I asked. He didn't look at me when he answered. "The Pentagon." He put the phone to his ear, waited exactly one ring, and spoke like the person on the other end had been expecting him all their life. "Move Captain Derek's audit up," he said. "Make it the morning of his wedding." Vance ended the call and slid his phone back into his pocket, like he'd just ordered a pizza, not rearranged someone's career with one sentence. I sat there in the passenger seat, staring at my screen, watching all the ugly pieces settle into place. The loan, the paperwork, the trap. Derek's stolen inventory, my parents' concern, Chloe's shiny wedding that was really just a deadline with flowers. Vance glanced at me. "You still going to that rehearsal dinner?" I let out a dry laugh. "I'm a bridesmaid. If I don't show up, my mother will call the police and tell them I stole her joy." He nodded like that made perfect sense. Then we go. The night before the wedding, Chloe's rehearsal dinner was held at the kind of country club that looks like it charges you for breathing. The parking lot was full of glossy SUVs and sports cars. The entrance was lit like a movie premiere. I arrived early because my mother demanded it. She texted me 3 times on the drive over. "Make sure you look presentable. Don't embarrass your sister. And for the love of God, don't bring that man in flannel again." I wore a simple dress and a neutral smile, the same outfit I'd worn to every family event for years. The kind of look that says, "I'm here, I'm harmless. Please don't yell at me in public." Inside the club smelled like money and anxiety. A hostess in a blazer led me toward the banquet room. Chloe had assigned seats. Of course she did. She had a color-coded seating chart that probably required a minor in engineering to understand. My name was at a table near the back, close to the kitchen doors. Not the worst seat, but definitely not one of the family spotlight tables. The message was subtle but clear. Pay for the flowers, then sit quietly near the exits. Derek's groomsmen were clustered near the bar, laughing too loudly. Most of them had that same military look. Short haircuts, stiff posture, and the confidence of men who thought the world owed them applause. Derek himself was holding court at the center table like he was hosting a campaign event. Chloe floated beside him, smiling so hard it looked painful. My parents spotted me and waved me over. Brenda's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Evelyn, you made it." Arthur didn't even say hello. He went straight to business. "Did you confirm the florist's schedule?" "Yes, Dad." "Good," he said, like he was approving a work report. Chloe leaned in close, her perfume hitting me like a floral assault. "Try to stay out of the way tonight, okay? I need everything perfect." I nodded. "Wouldn't dream of ruining your big moment." She didn't catch the sarcasm. She never did unless it was directed at someone she didn't like. Dinner started with speeches. Chloe's maid of honor talked about how Chloe always deserved the best. Derek's best man joked about Derek being a legend who could handle anything. I almost choked on my water. Handle anything. The man couldn't handle a spreadsheet without stealing from it. I kept my face neutral. That was my superpower in my family. Looking calm while mentally taking notes. Vance wasn't there yet. Chloe had made a big show of not inviting him directly, but I'd told her he'd be joining me anyway. She had smiled and said, "Sure, bring him. We love meeting new people," which is what people say when they're lying through their teeth. Every few minutes, someone asked me, "So where's your boyfriend?" in that sweet tone people use when they don't believe you. I replied the same way every time. "He'll be here." And then I waited. About 20 minutes into dinner, the room shifted. It was subtle. People didn't gasp, nobody pointed, but heads turned. Vance walked in like he belonged there, even though he looked like the least flashy man in the entire building. He wore a simple navy suit. No obvious designer label, no shiny cufflinks, no look-at-me accessories, just clean-tailored and quiet. He scanned the room, spotted me, and walked over. My mother's jaw tightened immediately. She leaned toward Arthur and muttered something that made his eyes narrow. Chloe's smile faltered for half a second, then snapped back on like a light switch. Vance reached my table and pulled out the chair beside me. "Sorry I'm late," he said calmly. I glanced up at him. "Traffic." He smiled, something like that. He sat down, picked up his napkin, and placed it neatly in his lap. Like this was just another dinner. Derek noticed him almost immediately. I saw the exact moment Derek's ego kicked into gear. His eyes narrowed, then his mouth pulled into a grin that wasn't friendly. He leaned toward one of his groomsmen and said something. They laughed. Then Derek stood up and made his way over. He walked with that swagger some men get when they think they're about to win a social contest. His buddies trailed behind him like backup dancers. "Vance," Derek said loudly, drawing attention. "Glad you could make it." Vance stood slightly polite. "Thanks for having me." Derek smiled like he was about to offer charity again. "You know," Derek said, speaking loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "we're always looking for help on base. Good workers, guys who don't mind getting their hands dirty." One of the groomsmen chuckled. Derek reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $20 bill. He held it up like a prize, and then dropped it onto Vance's plate. "There you go," Derek said. "Consider it in advance. I'm sure you'd be great cleaning the barracks." The table went quiet for a beat, the way rooms do when people sense a fight, but don't want to admit they're excited. Then Chloe laughed. Not a polite laugh, a full delighted laugh. She leaned toward me and said loud enough for others to hear, "Wow, Evelyn, that's generous. Most fake sugar daddies don't even get benefits." The groomsmen laughed harder. My mother smiled like she'd just watched someone discipline a disobedient pet. Arthur's lips curled slightly, like this was exactly how things should be. I felt heat rise in my chest, but I didn't move. I didn't react, not yet. Vance looked down at the $20 bill sitting on his plate. He didn't flinch. He didn't glare. He didn't even look insulted. He picked it up slowly, folded it neatly in half, then in half again like he was preparing it for a wallet. Then he stood and held it out to Derek. "Keep it," Vance said calmly. Derek's grin widened. "Aw, come on, don't be proud. Work is work." Vance's voice stayed even. "Work is work." And then he stepped a little closer, just enough that only Derek could hear what came next. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the effect. Vance whispered something. Derek's smile froze mid-performance. His face drained so fast it was like someone pulled a plug. His eyes flicked to Vance's, then away, like he was suddenly looking for an exit in a burning building. The groomsmen stopped laughing. Chloe's laugh died in her throat. My mother blinked confused like she'd just seen the help speak out of turn. Derek swallowed hard. His hand twitched at his side. He forced a laugh that sounded like a car failing to start. "Good one," he said, but his voice cracked. Vance sat back down calmly, as if none of it mattered. Derek stepped backward. "Excuse me," he muttered and turned away too fast. He stumbled into one of his groomsmen, then kept going, pushing through the crowd. I watched him reach the edge of the banquet room near the hallway leading to the restrooms. He pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped it. He stared at the screen, thumb hovering like he couldn't decide who to call first. And that's when I knew. Whatever Vance whispered wasn't a threat. It was a fact. A specific, ugly fact that Derek recognized instantly. The kind of detail you only know if you're looking straight at the crime. Derek glanced back toward our table, panic written all over his face, and then turned away again, pacing like a man who'd just realized the floor beneath him wasn't solid. I leaned slightly toward Vance. "What did you say?" Vance didn't look at Derek. He lifted his water glass and took a slow sip. "I gave him a number," he said quietly. "What kind of number?" The kind he thought no one outside his office would ever know. I watched Derek disappear down the hallway, phone pressed to his ear, now talking fast. The room slowly filled with noise again. Nervous laughter, confused whispers, people returning to their food. Chloe tried to recover with a loud joke, but it landed wrong. Her eyes kept flicking toward the hallway. My parents sat stiff, trying to pretend nothing happened while absolutely dying to know what happened. And me, I sat there looking down at my untouched dinner, realizing something important. Derek had been so busy mocking a janitor that he didn't notice the janitor had just walked into his life with a master key. And whatever was about to happen next, it wasn't going to be handled quietly. The second the rehearsal dinner ended, Derek's whole attitude shifted from cocky captain to man who just remembered he left the stove on. He kept smiling for people, but his eyes were frantic. Chloe didn't stop talking, but she watched him like he might bolt. My parents acted like nothing happened, which was their favorite strategy when reality showed up uninvited. Vance and I left without making a scene. We didn't need to. Derek was already making one all by himself. By the time I got back to the hotel, I didn't feel tired. I felt focused, like my brain had gone into a clean cold mode where emotions weren't driving anymore. I slept maybe 3 hours. At exactly 8 a.m., someone started pounding on my hotel room door like they were trying to serve a warrant. I opened it in leggings and a t-shirt hair, still messy eyes, half awake. My mother pushed past me without saying hi. She was holding a large cup of coffee. Not a travel mug, a full-size cup like she planned to use it as a weapon. Her eyes went straight to the bridesmaid dress hanging in the closet, my custom pastel dress that I'd paid for myself because Chloe insisted everyone match perfectly. Brenda walked over, lifted the dress slightly off the hanger, and then accidentally tipped the coffee. It wasn't a splash, it was a pour. Hot coffee soaked the fabric from top to bottom, turning the front of the dress into a ruined brown stain in about 2 seconds. I stared at it, then at her. She didn't even pretend to be sorry. She smiled small and mean. "You were going to ruin the photos anyway," she said. "Stay in the back." I stood there for a moment, looking at my mother like she'd just shown me her real face. Not the concerned parent, not the stressed wedding mom, just a woman who enjoyed putting me in my place. Then she turned toward the door like she expected tears, like she expected me to beg, like she expected me to panic because Chloe's big day depended on my ability to wear a stupid pastel dress. I didn't do any of that. I simply said, "Okay." That threw her off. She blinked. "Okay, yep," I said. "I'll stay in the back." She narrowed her eyes, waiting for the meltdown she'd ordered. When it didn't arrive, she huffed and walked out. "You better not pull anything today," she snapped over her shoulder. I closed the door softly, and then I moved. Not fast in a frantic way, fast in a deliberate way. I pulled my suitcase off the luggage rack and unzipped it. I packed a bag with what I needed: my laptop, my external drive, a change of clothes, my wallet, and my passport. Not because I planned to leave the country, because when your family is actively stealing your life, you stop assuming they won't do something worse. I set the bag by the door, then I opened my laptop. My home security system wasn't just a couple of cameras from a big box store. I had a full setup. Motion alerts, cloud storage, multiple angles. Part of my work life is understanding how people break into systems, so I make sure they don't break into mine. I logged into the camera feed for my house. For a second, the front porch view loaded normally. Empty, quiet. Then the driveway camera flickered and my stomach went flat. My dad was there. Arthur was standing in my driveway with a man in a blazer holding a clipboard. A real estate appraiser. Arthur smiled, shook his hand, and waved him inside my house like he owned the place. My hands didn't shake. They went cold. I watched as they walked through my living room, then my hallway. Arthur pointed at things, gesturing like he was the one selling the property. The appraiser took notes. Then Arthur opened a door and stepped into my bedroom. My bedroom. I stared at the screen like it might glitch, like this might be some weird mistaken camera feed. It wasn't. My father was in my home, letting a stranger measure the value of the place I paid for. While my mother just destroyed my dress, so I couldn't ruin the photos. They didn't want me in the pictures because they wanted me out of the house. This wasn't about a wedding, this was a takeover. I took a screenshot, then another. Timestamps included. I exported the clip. I didn't cry. Crying is for when you're still hoping people will change. I was past that. My phone buzzed. A text from Chloe. "Where are you? Hair and makeup starts at 9. Don't make today about you." I ignored it. Then my phone buzzed again. This time it was Vance. One photo, no caption. The image showed a plain office hallway, 2 men in suits, a uniformed person, an open door, boxes, a stack of computers being carried out. And there in the corner of the photo was a sign with Derek's unit designation. My eyes scanned it twice to be sure. I zoomed in. Then I saw a government property tag being slapped on a computer tower. This wasn't a rumor. This wasn't maybe. The audit team was already in Derek's office. My mouth went dry, but my mind stayed sharp. I texted Vance. "Is this happening now?" His reply came instantly. "Already started. Stay calm, don't tip anyone off." I stared at the camera feed again. Arthur was still walking the appraiser through my home. Like it was normal, like I wouldn't notice, like I was too busy playing bridesmaid to protect my own life. I closed the laptop slowly, then I turned to the ruined dress hanging in the closet. The coffee stain was spreading like a bruise. I didn't touch it. I didn't try to fix it. I didn't try to call the hotel staff or run to a store or panic about matching colors. Because the truth was, matching colors had never been the point. The point was control. The point was to keep me compliant and small while they made decisions over my head. I opened my suitcase again and pulled out something I hadn't planned to wear today. A black suit, tailored, clean lines, sharp shoulders, the kind of outfit that doesn't ask for permission. I'd bought it months ago for a work event and barely wore it. Now it felt like armor. I got dressed carefully, smoothing the jacket, fastening the buttons, checking the fit. I tied my hair back neatly, not fancy, not bridal, just clean and precise. Then I picked up my bag and headed out. In the hotel hallway, I passed a cluster of bridesmaids in pastel robes laughing about mimosas and lipstick colors. One of them stared at me like I'd walked into the wrong movie. Aren't you a bridesmaid?" she asked. I kept walking. Not today. I got into my car and drove toward the cathedral. The streets were busy with Saturday morning traffic. People heading to brunch errands, normal life. I wondered how many of them had families who actually liked them. My phone buzzed again. Brenda? I didn't answer. Arthur? I didn't answer. Chloe? I didn't answer. I pulled up to the cathedral and parked. The building was massive stone and stained glass, the kind of place meant for big moments and big lies. As I stepped out, I could already hear music inside. Soft, elegant, floating through the doors. Guests were arriving dressed up, smiling, holding gifts, and programs like they had no idea they were walking into a crime scene. I stood at the base of the steps for 1 second and took a breath. Not to steady myself, to choose. Then I walked up. I wasn't walking in as a bridesmaid. I wasn't walking in as the family helper. I wasn't walking in as the quiet sister who paid for flowers and stayed in the back. I was walking in as the executioner. The cathedral air hit different the moment I stepped inside, cool, polished, expensive, and full of people who thought they were watching a fairy tale. 300 guests easy. The pews were packed with Chloe's friends, my parents' favorite neighbors, and Derek's military crowd, all dressed like they were attending a gala instead of a wedding. I saw medals on lapels, crisp uniforms, and the kind of forced smiles people wear when they're competing to look the happiest. The place smelled like flowers I paid for. $15,000 of orchids and roses, arranged like an apology I never got. I moved down the center aisle slowly, not because I was trying to be dramatic, but because the room was crowded and I didn't feel like tripping in front of people who already thought I was a punchline. Heads turned, whispering started. A few people gave me that look that says, "Why is she dressed like she's about to negotiate a hostage release?" I reached the front pew and saw Vance standing off to the side, near the first row, calm as ever. He wasn't in flannel today. He wore a simple suit again, same as the rehearsal dinner. No medals, no obvious rank. Just a man who looked like he could sit through a wedding or run a courtroom. He glanced at me, and his expression tightened slightly like he was checking in without making a show of it. "You good," he murmured. "I'm awake," I said. He almost smiled. "That's usually enough." I slid into the front row beside him, which was already a statement all by itself. Brenda was 2 rows behind us, craning her neck like an angry goose. Arthur sat beside her, jaw clenched, probably planning his next speech about family loyalty and respect. Chloe was at the front near the altar, looking flawless. Her dress was bright white, fitted, dramatic, the kind of gown that makes people gasp, even if they don't like the bride. She looked like she belonged in a bridal magazine. She also looked like she'd never carried a grocery bag in her life. Derek stood at the altar too, in full dress uniform, chest puffed out like he was posing for a recruitment poster. But the illusion was cracking. He was sweating. Not normal, it's a big day sweating. This was my life might be over before lunch sweating. He kept glancing toward the doors, then toward the side hallway, then back to the doors again, like he expected someone to appear and announce that the wedding had been canceled due to fraud. If panic had a physical form, it would have been Derek's necktie pulling tighter every time he swallowed. The music played. The priest did the usual welcoming lines. People smiled, cameras clicked. Chloe's friends sniffled like they were watching something beautiful, and I sat there thinking about my father walking strangers through my house. Thinking about my mother pouring coffee on my dress like it was an accident. Thinking about Derek's embezzlement. Thinking about Chloe laughing in the kitchen. Vance leaned slightly toward me. They don't know yet, he said quietly. No, I whispered back. They think I'm still their quiet little ATM. He nodded once. Let them, the vows started. Chloe and Derek were supposed to read what they'd written. Chloe had made everyone listen to hers 3 times during wedding prep. It was full of the usual stuff, best friend forever, soulmates, all the words that sound good when you're not actively marrying a criminal. Derek's vows were shorter. Probably because it's hard to promise honesty when you've been lying through your teeth for years. The priest asked them to join hands. Chloe's voice shook with excitement. Derek's hands looked clammy. He kept wiping his palms subtly against his uniform when he thought nobody noticed. Then Chloe decided to go off script. I could see it in her face, this bright little spark of opportunity. She'd spotted me in the front row in black sitting beside a man she still thought was some random flannel loser. And Chloe couldn't resist. She reached for the microphone, smiling like she was about to share a cute story. I just want to say, she began, voice sweet and loud enough for the whole cathedral, I'm so blessed to marry a real hero. Derek's friends chuckled politely. A real man, Chloe continued, squeezing Derek's hand. Someone who serves our country, who has responsibility, who has purpose. She paused and her eyes flicked toward me. Not everyone is so lucky, she said, dragging the words out like she was savoring them. Some people have to drag in unemployed actors to pretend to love them. A wave of laughter rolled through the pews. Not everyone laughed, but enough did. I heard it like a ripple of approval. Arthur smirked. Brenda covered her mouth like she was trying not to laugh too loudly, but her shoulders were bouncing. Chloe beamed, proud of herself, like she'd just delivered a stand-up routine instead of insulting her sister in front of 300 people. I felt my face stay calm. Inside, something clicked into place. This wasn't just cruelty, this was performance cruelty. Chloe needed an audience. My parents needed agreement. Derek needed to feel like the powerful one. They didn't know they were laughing in a room that was already shifting under their feet. Vance didn't move. He didn't glare. He didn't react. He simply looked forward, calm and still, like a man waiting for the clock to hit the right minute. The priest cleared his throat, trying to steer the ceremony back to its planned script. Chloe handed the microphone back with a satisfied smile. The vows continued. The crowd settled. Derek kept checking the doors. Then the priest reached the part everyone recognizes, the part that's usually just tradition, of formality. He lifted his hand slightly and spoke in a clear voice that carried through the cathedral. If anyone objects to this union, he said, speak now or forever hold your peace. I didn't rush. I didn't dramatize it. I simply stood up. The sound of the pew creaking under me felt like it echoed. The entire cathedral went silent so fast it was almost funny. Even the photographers stopped moving. Chloe's smile fell off her face like someone yanked it away. Brenda's eyes widened in disbelief, like I'd broken a rule of physics. Arthur leaned forward, ready to shout. Derek's mouth opened slightly, then closed again. He looked at me like he already knew what was coming, but he still hoped I wouldn't say it out loud. I spoke clearly, calm enough that my voice carried without effort. I don't object to the union, I said. Chloe exhaled sharply, almost like she was about to laugh again. Then I continued. But the Department of Defense does. You could have heard a pin drop on the marble floor. Chloe blinked like she didn't understand English. What? She snapped. Arthur stood halfway, his face red. Evelyn, sit down. Brenda hissed. Stop this right now. Derek's head jerked toward the doors again, and this time his eyes weren't just nervous. They were terrified. Chloe turned fully toward me, furious now, gripping her bouquet like she wanted to throw it. You are not doing this at my wedding, she hissed into the microphone, voice sharp and trembling. Sit down, Evelyn, sit down. I didn't sit. I looked at her, then at Derek, then back at Chloe. I'm not the one doing anything, I said evenly. I'm just standing where you can see me. Chloe's face twisted. You're jealous. You're embarrassing yourself. Derek took one step backward, then another, shifting toward the side exit, like a man who'd practiced running away in his head. The priest looked confused and frightened, hands hovering awkwardly like he didn't know if he was supposed to pray or call security. Derek's eyes locked on the side door. He made a decision. He turned and started moving, not sprinting yet, but fast enough that it wasn't subtle. Chloe grabbed his arm. Derek, what are you doing? He pulled away. I need air. It was the worst lie he'd told all day, and that's saying something. He headed for the side exit. That's when the heavy oak doors at the back of the cathedral swung open. And the sound wasn't gentle. It was the sound of authority arriving. The doors opened so wide they banged softly against the stone, and every head in the cathedral turned like it was choreographed. 6 military police officers marched in boots, landing in perfect rhythm on the aisle runner. Behind them were 2 men in suits, carrying slim briefcases, the kind of serious briefcases that never contain sandwiches. The room didn't just go quiet. It froze. People stared the way they do when something happens that doesn't belong in their world. Weddings are supposed to be controlled, chaos, flowers, music, tears. Maybe a drunk uncle, not law enforcement. Chloe's eyes went huge. "What is this?" she snapped, voice high. Derek stopped moving toward the side exit. His body stiffened like his brain tried to shut down his legs. My father Arthur stood up fast, knocking his knee against the pew. "This is a private event," he shouted, his voice bouncing off the vaulted ceiling. "You can't just come in here." One of the MPs didn't even glance at him. They kept walking centered and steady, heading straight down the aisle like they owned the building. The priest backed away from the altar in slow motion, hands raised like this was a robbery. Guests started whispering frantically. "Are those MPs? Is this part of the ceremony? Is this some kind of prank?" Derek's groomsmen were standing now, confused and suddenly sober, eyes locked on the uniforms approaching. A couple of them looked like they wanted to melt into the floor. Derek looked like he'd already tried that and failed. Arthur moved into the aisle like he was about to physically block them. He pointed toward the doors and shouted again, louder this time. "I said this is private, you have no right." An MP finally looked at him. It wasn't angry. It wasn't emotional. It was the look you give someone who thinks they're in charge but clearly isn't. Arthur faltered mid-sentence. His confidence hiccuped. The MPs didn't stop. They walked right past him. Arthur turned stunned like a man watching his own authority get ignored in real time. The MPs reached the front pew. They didn't stop at the altar. They stopped at Vance, right in front of him. And then something happened that snapped the whole room into a new reality. The lead MP officer came to attention and snapped a crisp, perfect salute. "Area secured." "General Vance," the officer said loudly. "Orders ready for your signature." Time did something weird in that moment. It didn't slow down like in movies. It didn't speed up. It just got painfully clear. Chloe dropped her bouquet. It didn't fall gracefully. It hit the marble with a dull thud, petals shifting like they were shocked too. Brenda gasped so hard it sounded like she'd swallowed a bug. Arthur's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at Vance, then at me, then back at Vance like he was trying to solve a math problem with missing numbers. And Derek made a small broken sound in his throat and dropped to his knees. Not dramatically, not heroically, just collapsed. Like his body finally accepted what his mind had been fighting all week. People in the pews stared at Vance now. The man they'd been mocking as Flannel Guy, an unemployed actor. The man Derek threw $20 at like he was tossing scraps to a stray dog. Vance didn't move fast. He didn't need to. He stood up from the pew with a calm, controlled motion that made the whole room hold its breath. And I swear the air changed. It wasn't magic, it was presence. The friendly, quiet guy who asked polite questions over steak was gone. The man standing there had a posture that didn't ask for space. It took it. Vance stepped into the aisle. The MPs shifted slightly around him, like they were adjusting to a center point. He looked at Derek on his knees, sweating, shaking, eyes darting. Vance's voice was steady, and it carried without him raising it. "Captain," he said. Derek flinched like he'd been slapped. Vance took one more step forward and looked down at him. "You are under arrest for the embezzlement of $1.2 million in federal assets," Vance said. A collective shock rolled through the room. Someone near the middle pew actually whispered, "Oh my God," like they'd just found out the bride was marrying a ghost. Chloe stood frozen at the altar, hands hovering helplessly at her sides. Her face looked like someone had erased the makeup with disbelief. "Derek," she croaked. Derek didn't even look at her. Vance continued, his tone calm but absolute. "You thought you were untouchable," he said. "You thought you could hide behind rank. You thought you could use this family to bury your crimes." Arthur found his voice again, but it came out thin and panicked. "This is insane," he shouted. "There's no proof. This is harassment." One of the suited men, one of the JAG lawyers, stepped forward slightly, holding a folder, expression flat. "Sir," he said. "Please sit down," Arthur sputtered. "Who do you think you are telling me?" The MP officer turned his head just enough to make Arthur shut up. That wasn't intimidation. That was reality doing its job. Derek's groomsmen started inching backward. One of them mouthed, "I didn't know, like the universe might be taking notes." Vance nodded once to the MPs. Two officers stepped forward. One reached for Derek's wrists. Derek tried to speak. "General, I can explain." Vance didn't even blink. "Save it for the investigators," he said. The handcuffs clicked shut. That sound was louder than it should have been. Metal on skin, final. Derek's shoulders sagged like he'd been carrying a secret backpack of rocks, and someone finally ripped it off, except now he was face first in the consequences. Chloe let out a strangled scream. "What are you doing?" she shrieked. "This is my wedding. You can't arrest him." She looked around wildly, searching for someone to fix this. "My parents, the priest, the guests. God." Nobody moved. Because there's no bridal veil strong enough to cover a federal crime. Brenda finally stumbled forward, hands out like she could physically push reality back into place. "Evelyn," she hissed, voice cracking. "What did you do?" I kept my face calm. "I stopped paying for your lies." Arthur lunged toward me, face red, eyes furious. "You ungrateful," he started. But an MP stepped into his path, instantly not touching him, just blocking him with the kind of presence that said, "Try it." Arthur stopped. His anger didn't disappear. It just got trapped. Vance watched all of it without showing emotion. He glanced at the JAG lawyers. One of them offered him a document set. "Orders ready," the lead officer repeated. Vance took the papers signed quickly and handed them back like he'd done this 1,000 times because he probably had. Then he turned slightly, his gaze sweeping the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice calm and clear. "This ceremony is suspended. Suspended. Not cancelled. Not ruined." Suspended like it was a meeting interrupted by a fire alarm. Derek was pulled to his feet, handcuffed, shoulders slumped, eyes glassy. He didn't fight. He couldn't. His uniform suddenly looked less like power and more like a costume. As the MPs guided him down from the altar steps, Derek's eyes met mine for half a second. He looked like he wanted to beg, like he wanted to bargain, like he wanted me to fix it the way I always fix things. But I wasn't fixing anything anymore. I was documenting it. And that's when I stepped out of the pew. I reached down, picked up my bag, and pulled out a thick manila folder. Not a dramatic folder, a heavy one, the kind that makes a sound when you set it down like it contains consequences. I walked up the steps toward the altar, holding it tight, and turned my body toward the people who had always treated me like their backup plan. My parents, Arthur and Brenda. Because Derek being arrested was only the beginning. I stepped up to the altar while the MPs led Derek down the aisle in handcuffs. The room was still buzzing with shock, but Chloe suddenly found her voice again. She staggered forward, mascara already starting to run. "You ruined my wedding," she screamed, pointing at me like I had personally caused gravity to stop working. "You did this. You always have to make everything about you." Her voice cracked into loud sobs, the kind meant to draw sympathy. Some guests shifted uncomfortably. A few whispered. Others watched like they'd just bought tickets to a show they didn't expect. Arthur pushed past the pews and stormed toward the front, face red, chest heaving. "You've disgraced this family," he barked. "You hear me? Evelyn disgraced us. And tomorrow you're out. I'm evicting you from our house. Our house." I almost smiled. I reached for the microphone the priest had left on the stand. My fingers tapped it once to make sure it was on. The small feedback hum carried through the cathedral. "You can't evict me, Dad," I said calmly. 300 people heard every word. Arthur froze mid-rant. I opened the manila folder and pulled out the first document. "Because my house is locked in a federal trust," I continued, "which means you don't own it. You never did." I held up the next paper. "And the $50,000 loan you forged in my name," I said. "That's wire fraud." Brenda's face went white. Arthur shook his head violently. "That's ridiculous. You're lying." I flipped to the next set of documents. "Am I asked. My voice stayed steady. "I work as a forensic cyber auditor," I said. "And for the past week I've been tracking financial records connected to Captain Derek's logistics accounts." A ripple of whispers moved through the crowd. Chloe stared at me like she didn't recognize the language I was speaking. I continued. "The missing funds didn't just disappear," I said. "They moved through multiple transfers before landing somewhere very specific." I lifted the final page and turned it toward the audience. "Your bank accounts," I said, looking directly at Arthur and Brenda. Brenda staggered back a step. Arthur's mouth opened, but nothing came out. "You used stolen military funds to pay the deposit on the wedding venue," I said, "which means you weren't just covering up Derek's crimes." I paused long enough for the silence to settle. You were helping him. The room erupted into whispers. Guests looked at each other, then back at my parents like they were suddenly strangers. Behind me, I heard movement. 2 federal agents stepped forward from the back of the cathedral, walking down the aisle with quiet purpose. Arthur finally snapped. "This is insane," he shouted. "We didn't do anything." But the agents kept walking. Brenda grabbed his arm, shaking now. Around us, the realization spread through the crowd. 300 wedding guests slowly understood the same thing at once. This wasn't a wedding anymore. It was a crime scene. The cathedral dissolved into noise, but inside my head, everything felt quiet. MPS were guiding Derek out the doors. Guests were standing, whispering, staring, trying to decide if they should leave or pretend this was still a wedding. At the altar, Chloe stood frozen. Her perfect white dress, $15,000 of lace and silk, looked suddenly ridiculous against the chaos around her. The makeup artist's work was starting to streak down her face as the reality sank in. Across the aisle, 2 federal agents had already reached my parents. One of them was calmly reading Arthur his rights. "You have the right to remain silent." Arthur wasn't listening. He was shaking his head over and over, like if he denied the moment hard enough it would rewind. Brenda looked different. For the first time in my life, she didn't look confident. She didn't look superior. She didn't look like the woman who always knew how to manipulate the room. She looked small. She pulled her arm away from the agent and rushed toward me. "Evelyn," she gasped, voice breaking. "Please, stop this." Her hands trembled as she reached out like she expected me to comfort her. "We're your family," she said desperately. "We're your blood. You can't do this to us." I looked at her, not angry, not satisfied, just tired. For years, I'd imagined this moment, standing up to them, exposing everything, finally being heard. But now that it was happening, the feeling wasn't victory. It was clarity. "Family doesn't forge your signature," I said quietly. She froze. "Family doesn't steal your house," I continued. "Family doesn't use you as a shield." Arthur glared at me from behind the agents. "You chose a thief over your own daughter," as I said, meeting both of their eyes, because he wore a shiny uniform. I paused, letting the truth sit there where everyone could hear it. "Now you can wear matching ones." The lead investigator stepped forward beside me. I reached into my bag and pulled out the small flash drive. Every document, every transfer, every forged signature, every financial trail, I placed it in his hand. "That's the rest," I said. He nodded once. "Understood." Behind us, Chloe let out a broken laugh that turned into sobbing. Her wedding guests were already slipping toward the exits, stepping carefully around the mess, like people leaving a theater after the show ended badly. I didn't watch my parents get led away. I didn't watch Chloe collapse onto the altar steps. I had spent my entire life watching them. I was done. I turned my back on the altar. Vance was standing a few steps away, calm as always. Like this had been just another assignment finished. He placed a steady hand on my lower back, gentle but protective. "You ready?" he asked quietly. I took one last breath inside that cathedral. "Yeah," I said. We walked down the aisle together. The exact path Chloe was supposed to walk a few minutes earlier. Guests moved aside automatically, watching us pass in stunned silence. The doors opened and bright afternoon sunlight spilled across the steps outside. For the first time all day, the air felt warm. A black SUV was waiting at the curb. Vance opened the passenger door for me. I climbed in, setting my bag beside my feet. He walked around the front, got behind the wheel, and started the engine. As we pulled away from the cathedral, I looked back once. Not at the building, at the feeling I was leaving behind. Then I faced forward, completely free. Before we wrap up, I want to ask you something. Do you think cutting ties with family who betray you like this is the right decision, or should people always try to give family another chance? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about justice, resilience, and walking away stronger. As the SUV pulled away from the cathedral that afternoon, I expected to feel something dramatic. Relief, victory, maybe even satisfaction. After everything that had happened, the arrests, the truth coming out in front of 300 guests, my entire family's carefully built image, collapsing in real time, I thought there would be some kind of emotional explosion, but there wasn't. What I felt instead was quiet. For the first time in years, there was no pressure on my chest, no voice in the back of my mind reminding me to fix someone else's problem, pay someone else's bill, or apologize for something that wasn't my fault. It was just silence. And that silence gave me time to think about something important. A lot of people would probably hear my story and label it as one of those revenge stories. The kind you see online where someone finally exposes the people who hurt them. But if I'm being honest, revenge wasn't the most important part of what happened. The most important part was learning when to stop. Stop trying to prove my worth to people who had already decided what role I was supposed to play. Stop believing that if I worked harder, gave more, or stayed quiet long enough, my family would eventually respect me. And stop confusing loyalty with self-destruction. For most of my adult life, I was the reliable daughter, the one who solved problems, the one who paid for emergencies, the one who didn't cause scenes. At first, it felt like responsibility, something to be proud of. But over time, responsibility slowly turned into expectation, and expectation turned into entitlement. My family didn't just appreciate my help anymore, they depended on it. And when people depend on something long enough, they start to believe they deserve it. That's how you become the family ATM without even noticing. You tell yourself it's temporary. You tell yourself it's just this one time. You tell yourself you're doing the right thing. But slowly the pattern becomes permanent. One of the hardest lessons I had to accept was that the signs had always been there, long before the forged loan, long before the plan to take my house, long before Chloe laughed about my fake boyfriend in front of a crowd. There were small moments, little comments, the way my accomplishments were ignored while Chloe's smallest achievements were celebrated like national holidays, the way my help was expected but never acknowledged, the way every boundary I tried to set was treated like a personal attack. Looking back now, those weren't random incidents. They were warnings. But when the people hurting you are your own family, it's very easy to convince yourself that you're overreacting. You tell yourself they didn't mean it. You tell yourself they're just stressed. You tell yourself family always comes first. And that idea family always comes first can become incredibly dangerous when it's used to justify abuse. That's something I want people to understand, especially those who watch family stories like mine, and wonder how situations like this can happen. They don't start with huge betrayals. They start small, a little disrespect, a little manipulation, a little guilt. And every time you accept it, the line moves further away, until one day you realize the line disappeared completely. Another thing I learned through all of this is that setting boundaries doesn't make you selfish. In toxic families, boundaries are treated like betrayal. The moment you say no, you're suddenly labeled ungrateful. The moment you stop paying, you're accused of abandoning everyone. The moment you defend yourself, you're told you're destroying the family. I heard all of those things. But here's the truth I wish I had accepted years earlier. A healthy family does not collapse when one person stops being exploited. If the entire structure falls apart the moment you protect yourself, that structure was never healthy in the first place. It was a system built on your sacrifice. And once that sacrifice stops, the system exposes itself. What happened at that wedding was dramatic. I won't pretend it wasn't. It turned into one of those family drama moments that people will probably talk about for years. But the real change didn't happen in the cathedral. It happened earlier. The moment I decided I wasn't responsible for fixing people who were actively hurting me. Walking away from my family wasn't easy. Even when people treat you badly, there's still history there. Memories, habits, a lifetime of emotional connections that don't disappear overnight. But sometimes walking away is the only way to stop the cycle. And if there's one thing I want anyone listening to this story to remember, it's this. You don't need permission to protect your own life. You don't need approval to set boundaries. And you don't owe endless loyalty to people who see your kindness as a resource they can use. Family should not feel like a financial contract. It should feel like support. If it doesn't, then maybe the most powerful thing you can do isn't revenge. Maybe it's simply choosing a different future. In the weeks after everything happened, my life became strangely quiet. No late-night calls asking me to help out, just this once. No messages about unexpected bills. No long conversations where I was expected to apologize for problems I didn't create. Instead, something else started happening. People began writing to me. At first, it was a few messages, then dozens, then hundreds. Some came through social media, some through email, some through people who heard the story through friends. Most of them started the same way. I feel like you were describing my family. That surprised me more than anything that happened at the wedding. Because when you're living inside a toxic situation, it often feels unique. You assume your experience is strange or rare. You think maybe you're the only person dealing with this kind of family drama. But the truth is, situations like mine happen more often than people realize. Not always with stolen money or federal crimes, not always with a dramatic moment at a wedding, but the emotional patterns are very similar. There is usually a responsible one in the family, the person who holds everything together, the one expected to fix problems, provide financial support, and stay calm when everyone else creates chaos. If that description sounds familiar to you, then I want to share a few things I learned the hard way. The first lesson is simple, but it can take years to truly understand. Pay attention to how people react when you stop giving them what they want. When you are useful to someone, they often treat you well, not because they respect you, but because they depend on you. But the moment you say no, the moment you stop solving their problems, their reaction will reveal everything. Some people will respect your boundaries. Others will become angry, manipulative, or even cruel. That reaction tells you more about the relationship than years of polite conversations ever could. The second lesson is about guilt. In many toxic family situations, guilt becomes the main tool used to control someone. You're told that you're selfish for protecting yourself. You're told that family should always come first. You're reminded of everything people have done for you in the past, even if those things were basic responsibilities. Over time, that guilt becomes heavy enough that you start questioning your own instincts. But here's the reality that took me years to accept. You are not responsible for the choices other people make. You are not responsible for someone else's debts. You are not responsible for protecting a family image that was built on lies. And you are definitely not responsible for sacrificing your future so that other people can avoid the consequences of their actions. Another thing I want people to understand is that leaving a toxic environment doesn't mean you hate your family. For a long time, I struggled with that idea. Walking away felt extreme. It felt like failure. But eventually I realized something important. Distance isn't always about anger. Sometimes it's about survival. Sometimes it's about giving yourself the space to rebuild a life that isn't constantly shaped by someone else's expectations. And sometimes it's about protecting your peace so you can finally breathe. The day I walked out of that cathedral, people probably assumed the story ended there. They saw the arrests. They saw the public collapse of a carefully staged wedding. From the outside, it probably looked like the perfect ending to one of those dramatic revenge stories people share online. But the real ending wasn't about revenge. It was about freedom. Freedom from financial manipulation. Freedom from constant guilt. Freedom from being treated like a tool instead of a person. And once you experience that kind of freedom, you realize something powerful. Your life does not belong to the people who try to control it. It belongs to you. Stories like mine are often shared as shocking family stories or intense family drama, but I think their real value is something deeper. Can change everything. No, if you've been, can change everything. No, if you've been listening to the story and parts of it felt familiar, if you've ever felt like the invisible support system holding a family together, while no one appreciates what you sacrifice, then I hope the story gives you something valuable. Not anger, not revenge, but perspective. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about resilience, standing up for yourself, and walking away stronger, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a story can do isn't entertain you. Sometimes it reminds you that your own life is worth protecting.
Final note. This story is a work of fiction, but the valuable lessons we discuss are entirely real and continue to happen to many people every day. If this style isn't for you, that's perfectly okay. Please feel free to look for other content that better suits your needs.